Good afternoon to you. 3:06 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up this very hour from NewsNation, Jorge Ventura will join us at 3:30 as the Border Patrol exchanges fire with cartel members in Fronton, Texas. Jorge, with the latest on that horrifying tale from our southern border, things are getting dicey there. Bernard Hudson is with us at 4 o'clock. 28-year CIA veteran. He's got some thoughts on Tulsi Gabbard as she's considered this week by the Senate to be the director of national intelligence. Reagan Reese, White House correspondent for the Daily Caller, here at 4:30. She got a chance to ask Karoline Leavitt a few questions today in the first official press briefing out of the press secretary. And Andrew Arthur at 5 o'clock from the Center for Immigration Studies gives us the latest on those issues. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630 WMAL. Karoline Leavitt, White House press secretary, today.
To foreign nationals who are thinking about trying to illegally enter the United States, think again. Under this president, you will be detained and you will be deported. Every day, Americans are safer because of the violent criminals that President Trump's administration is removing from our communities.
An excellent start for the White House press secretary, Karoline Leavitt, who we've had the opportunity to talk to throughout the campaign phase. Now she's in the White House. She is, as you may have heard by now, the youngest press secretary to ever serve in this role at the age of 27. But she sounds more poised, more competent than most of the people who come through so many of the hallways in Washington, D.C. She did a very good job today. Facing off against a somewhat hostile at times press corps, although she restructured the press briefing. She said right at the outset that she will be calling on the non-legacy media pretty routinely. And in fact, she even referred new media members, wherever you are in the country, to a White House website to sign up for credentials to be able to get in and start asking these questions in person of the White House press secretary. So a nice change there, more actual diverse voices being welcomed into that press briefing room. Karoline Leavitt did start with a real big emphasis today on the effort to get control of our country and to eject the foreign nationals who are here illegally. She talked about how this is not going to be the policy of the Biden administration. In fact, by now you should know it hasn't been. It is a total reversal of what Biden did, which is to roll out the welcome mat for foreign nationals everywhere to illegally pour into our country. Karoline saying, no, that's not happening. You are not welcome here. Not that way. And in fact, she said among the people they're picking up are some very, very violent criminals.
On January 23rd, ICE New York arrested a Turkish national for entry without inspection who is a known or suspected terrorist. On January 23rd, ICE San Francisco arrested a citizen of Mexico unlawfully present in the United States who has been convicted of continuous sexual abuse of a child aged 14 years or younger. ICE St. Paul has arrested a citizen of Honduras who was convicted of fourth-degree criminal sexual conduct with a minor. ICE Buffalo arrested a citizen of Ecuador who has been convicted of rape. ICE Boston arrested a citizen of the Dominican Republic who has a criminal conviction for second-degree murder. This criminal was convicted of murder for beating his pregnant wife to death in front of her 5-year-old son. And ICE St. Paul also arrested a citizen of Mexico who was convicted of possessing pornographic material of a minor on a work computer.
Yeah, the people they're picking up are as vile as you could possibly imagine, and you know what this obviously implies? It's that the Biden administration knew about all of this and let these people just run wild and free in the United States in order to inflict more chaos on our people. And so just another atrocity at the hands of the Biden administration, the Trump administration reversing all of that now. And it's good. The actual numbers of people who are being swept up here in these efforts to get especially these violent criminals out of the country. Nearly 1,200 people were arrested yesterday across the country. 1,200 people as ICE agents are fanning out in all these various cities. That number has ramped up with each passing day. It wasn't that long ago. They were beneath 1,000. They're now up to around 1,200 at the moment. And the goal is to grow it more and more and more. And one of the ways that they'll do that is as they pick up these illegal aliens, especially the very violent ones. They're gathering intelligence in the process so that they can expand their efforts to find even worse criminals and even more illegal aliens. So this is a nonstop effort that needs to be undertaken, given the many, many millions that the Biden team allowed into the country. Also, border crossings themselves have plummeted to unseen lows. Migrant encounters have absolutely collapsed on the southern border. They say that there is now just an average of 1,041 total encounters a day at the border at the moment. And that's a massive, massive drop from where things back in 2023. Let's see. Fox News reporting on Monday that fewer than 600 people crossed illegally into the U.S. on Sunday, and that not a single of the 9 sectors received more than 200 illegal crossings. The Del Rio sector, which is the same sector that would have sustained over 4,000 crossings per day during the height of the border crisis back in December of 2023, they only recorded 60 attempted crossings. So take that. 4,000 is what Biden was at. We are now down to just 60 attempts. And that's a huge sign that people are getting the message all over the planet that we are not, it's not the kind of place where you can illegally cross into the country anymore. And the message is definitely getting out there. ICE, of course, pursuing all of these violent illegals. That's leading them to knock on doors and go to all sorts of places all across the country. That includes right here in our area, where this week we had a report out of NBC Washington that ICE was targeting an apartment complex in Fairfax County. And when they went, it was early in the morning, and they apparently knocked on some dude's door. He's a white dude, bald head, glasses. He's a Democrat, as you'll be able to hear in the audio ahead. And he was upset that ICE was enforcing the law, that ICE was even bothering to pursue violent criminals. Here's what it sounded like. Here's how NBC Washington presented it this week. Take a listen.
There were ICE operations in Northern Virginia over the weekend as well. This is video of one of those operations in Fairfax County. Residents there expressing concern about enforcement teams coming to their doors. Northern Virginia Bureau Chief Julie Carey is live in the Beacon Hill area now.
Yeah.
With what we know about the
tell
operation.
Us, Julie.
Julie, what can you tell
happened?
us?
Well, hang on. These are actually called the Beacon Hill Apartments. When you're going down Richmond Highway in Fairfax County, they're right behind the Home Depot and the Giant. And the residents in that particular building, they tell me they had a rude awakening yesterday morning when the ICE agents rolled in. That's how Sunday morning started for the residents in this 3-story building. One resident says he was awakened around 6:15.
I woke up to very loud, what I would categorize as aggressive knocks at my door.
Okay, this is the bald white dude with the tortoiseshell glasses talking to NBC Washington.
I approached the door, but before opening it, I asked who it was. I heard in response that it was the police. I asked if they had a warrant. They indicated that they did.
He says when they gave him an Hispanic name he didn't recognize, he opened the door.
I fully expected to see Fairfax County police at the door. Instead, I saw a group of men. It was at least 4, but I think it was more, decked out in what I would describe as like tactical gear.
They were carrying weapons of war.
In the video provided to News 4 by another resident, you can see the word police and the acronym ERO, which stands for Enforcement and Removal Operations within ICE.
I told them that they should be ashamed of themselves, that they were breaking up families, and that, what my government was doing was embarrassing, and they're embarrassing our country.
So, in other words, you were of no help to the guys who are trying to eject violent criminals from the country. Tom Homan has been crystal clear about what's going on right now. They're doing their best to sweep up every violent criminal they can possibly get a hold of. But if they encounter illegal aliens who, let us reemphasize, have violated the law by illegally coming into the United States, then yes, they will enforce the law when it comes to people who are nonviolent among the illegal aliens. That's just the way it works. There are consequences to breaking the laws of this country. At least there should be. And it's a way to prevent people from making that decision in the future. And here you have goofy white liberal living in Northern Virginia He gets a knock on the door from law enforcement. They have a warrant. What do you think the warrant is for? The warrant is for so that they can catch someone who desperately needs to be taken out of the community for the safety of that community, to include the goofy, bald, white liberal with the tortoiseshell glasses. And there he is going, you should be ashamed of yourself because what is his media consumption? How many episodes of Rachel Maddow has he recorded? I mean, this guy is completely delusional. And so he's, and he's unfortunately par for the course, the typical Northern Virginia Democrat standing there. He thinks he's on the side of decency. He somehow he's conjured up in his head that he's fighting back against the Nazis or something. You stop it right now. This ends here. And meanwhile, these poor cops, they've had the cuffs on them. They haven't been able to actually do their jobs under Joe Biden. In fact, they were so long-suffering that Biden's outgoing ICE director has been doing media hits on MSNBC this past week, declaring that he's thrilled by what he's seeing out of the Trump administration right now. He can't even believe how nice it is that they can finally do their jobs. Here he is, PJ Leckleitner. He's on MSNBC this week saying, boy, ICE is doing a great job. The Trump administration, this is Biden's ICE director, saying the Trump guys are doing great.
The administration seems to be very focused on this. From the policy from the previous administration to this current administration, they've changed and refocused the priorities and the policies. And this is all in accordance with the INA. I mean, it's in accordance with law. They can choose to be more aggressive, more muscular with their enforcement activities. It's nice to see the people of ICE getting the support they need to do the work that they're being asked to do.
Except from Democrats in Fairfax County.
It's nice to see the administration really doing an interagency support network for that, because it's just too much for ICE to do on its own, and have the DOJ collaborate with that. It's really good to see that federal collaboration and work. And these are, targeted operations, and you've heard before the officials say it's, the borders are Tom Holman. These are being prioritized, public safety, national security.
Yeah.
However, if they find other individuals that are collateral arrests that are here, undocumented illegally, then they'll pick them up as well.
Okay, so enthusiastic, a round of applause from Biden's ICE director, the poor guy who was long-suffering under Joe Biden, not able to do his job. Did you notice that ICE was one of the few agencies releasing statements that made sense during the Biden administration? Things like, this sanctuary city keeps preventing us from getting a hold of these criminals. They were just releasing these, and I saw those as, those are like acts of insurrection in the Biden era. You're not even allowed to say that, and yet ICE did, and thank God they did. It's unfortunate what happened to ICE in that era. What a morale boost it must be to be able to do your job, albeit under very dangerous circumstances right now. So yes, the handcuffs are off, but boy, they're walking into some very dangerous environments to pick up very dangerous criminals that Biden let run all over the place. Biden's ICE director, not the only one who's giving Donald Trump and company a round of applause for getting control of this. The American people are also doing that. Harry Enton, the numbers guy over at CNN. Take a look at this.
Just want to know how different things are from where we were when Donald Trump first took office, and how much more the American people are on the side of Republicans than they were 8 years ago. So trust which party more on immigration. You go back to April of 2017. Look at this. The Democrats held an 11-point advantage over Republicans. So Americans were not liking what Donald Trump and the Republican Party was doing back at the beginning of his first term. Look at where they are now, though. Poll out just in the last week, after Donald Trump took office, which party you trust more in immigration? Look at the margin Republicans are putting up here. A 22-point lead over Democrats. You rarely see issues in which the American people side so much with one party over the other, but on the main issue that Donald Trump has been pumping up and Republicans have been pumping up since the beginning of his term, that began just 1 week ago, Republicans lead overwhelmingly on this. It's not just unusual for right now. It's just so much different than where we were 8 years ago. It just gives the Republicans a lot more leverage.
Yeah, I do love Harry Enton segments. They really do amuse me to no end. It's like, over here we had this very small number, and now we have a huge number. What a difference from the small number to the huge number, and how much things have changed. And they're like, what? You're just writing on a whiteboard. What are you talking about? Why are you so... All right, the ICE operations aren't limited to Fairfax County in our area. They're also happening in Maryland, in Silver Spring. The Associated Press capturing some video talking to an ICE agent about the operations that they're undertaking to catch, let's see, a murderer, a robber, a drug dealer, and a pedophile. Take a listen.
Yeah, so this morning, ICE Baltimore started off. We had we have 4 teams out. So the team that you guys were with today, we had our 4 targets initially, where we had our child pornography, our wanted homicide down in El Salvador, our armed robber, and our drug dealer. Now, so far, we've apprehended the man wanted for homicide in El Salvador. We've apprehended the armed robber. We are currently sitting outside and waiting for the conviction for child pornography. We're going to sit on that house for a couple more hours. And the drug dealer gave us a bad address, but we're gonna hunt him down. Like, my officers are the best in the business at this, so we will find him. Other than that, we were able to apprehend 12 other individuals. My other teams that were out today, a combination of ICE, Homeland Security investigations, and enforcement removal operations together. We're out arresting numerous cases throughout the state that were all public safety cases. ICE only does targeted enforcement operations. We do not do raids. We do not do dragnets. We do not do sweeps. That is not something ICE has ever done. We do targeted enforcement. But part of that targeted enforcement, if I'm going for an MS-13 gang member and I see someone next to him that has a big 13 on their face, I'm going to start asking that person questions. So in that aspect, what we'll do is we'll ask that person, and if we arrest him, we determine they're illegally in the United States. That is what we consider a collateral arrest.
Yeah. So word to the wise, don't etch the number 13 into your face. That's a good start. Also, just avoid face tattoos generally. That's general advice for you. Oh, man. Speaking of the immigration mission and getting control of the violent criminals who are in the country, Jorge Ventura is going to join us next. He's a national correspondent for NewsNation. As members of the cartel begin opening fire on the Border Patrol yesterday, Fronton, Texas, Jorge brings us an update on that story and where it goes next. That's ahead. Hey, good afternoon to you. It's 3:35 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up on the program, Bernard Hudson talks to us. Harvard fellow, 28-year CIA veteran. He's got some thoughts on Tulsi Gabbard as she's considered this week by the Senate to become the next director of national intelligence. Looking forward to that conversation. Reagan Reese, White House correspondent for the Daily Caller. She was in that press briefing today with Karoline Leavitt. She'll join us at 4:30. And then Andrew Arthur is here at 5 o'clock from the Center for Immigration Studies as we look at all of these big immigration issues, including birthright citizenship, new data on just how many new American citizens illegal aliens are producing each year. And you can join us, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL.
Of the 3,500 arrests ICE has made so far since President Trump came back into office, can you just tell us the numbers? How many have a criminal record versus those who are just in the country illegally?
All of them, because they illegally broke our nation's laws and therefore they are criminals as far as this administration goes. I know the last administration didn't see it that way, so it's a big culture shift in our nation to view someone who breaks our immigration laws as a criminal, but that's exactly what they are.
Well, that's why language matters. The left uses phrases like undocumented immigrants, but if you say illegal alien, there's no confusion, right? What percentage of illegal aliens have done something illegal? Well, all of them, by definition. Literally 100%. An amazing thing. A breath of fresh air and a dramatic improvement over the cringe era at the White House. So glad that's over. All right. Our Border Patrol is dealing with a lot right now. They've been able to very dramatically bring down border encounters and attempted crossings by foreign nationals. But in the process, there are some recurring threats that typically have received little attention in the past, but we're giving them attention now as the cartels open fire on Border Patrol agents. The Border Patrol agents yesterday returning fire in Fronton, Texas. Apparently nobody struck in the exchange of gunfire, but the risks are very real. Here to discuss is a man who showed up on the scene yesterday, Jorge Ventura, national correspondent for NewsNation. Jorge, good as always to speak with you, sir.
Hey, Vince. Thanks for having me on.
Okay, so what happened yesterday with the cartels and the Border Patrol agents?
So, Vince, in Fronton, Texas, which is in the Rio Grande Valley, it is an area that is notorious for cartel activity, migrant smuggling. When I was reporting for the Daily Caller a couple years ago, that was an area where we would actually be documenting children being smuggled in the middle of the night. You constantly heard gunfire. And yesterday, Border Patrol was patrolling that area, and according to our sources, cartel members were actually trying to cross a group illegally through the river, and that's when they opened fire at the Border Patrol. Border Patrol took cover, they returned fire, and they called for backup. That group that the cartel members were attempting to cross over did not make it onto American soil. We arrived shortly on the scene, and as soon as we arrived, we saw multiple agencies there, local law enforcement, Texas DPS, and we also saw Border TAC. That's the elite unit within Border Patrol. They were armed ready. They did secure the area. We spoke with officials who say that no one was hit. There are no injuries. As of now, there are no arrests. They are continuing to investigate that with Mexican authorities, but it just once again kind of highlights the danger Border Patrol is facing right now on the southern border. And Vince, this also comes just last week. Also, an American hiker on the California border was actually shot by cartel members. That American hiker actually had to be airlifted by Border Tech, that's that elite unit of Border Patrol. So it was a frightening situation, and it was a situation that agents did secure the area, but they're going to further investigate. But, yeah, things are kind of spicing up here on the border ever since President Trump did declare Mexican cartels as foreign terrorist organizations.
Yeah, he did. I was about to ask about that. So do you think, has the intensity of the conflict ramped up since the president's designation? In other words, the cartels get slapped with the terror label, and now is this sort of a reaction to that from the cartels?
So what it's interesting, Vince, is I've been reporting on the border now for 4 years, and typically when it comes to cartels and American law enforcement, cartels want to do whatever it takes to avoid any attention from American law enforcement because it could bring attention to areas where they're migrant smuggling or drug smuggling. So we're kind of seeing this change of tactic. I spoke with my sources in Mexico, in Tamaulipas. That's where the shots rang out. And according to my sources, they say because of President Trump's executive orders and cracking down on the border and making it also harder for humans to cross illegally, they say expect those cartel smuggling cases to ramp up dramatically, and we could possibly see more clashes. Yesterday was an example of that. So once again, it's a very frightening situation for Border Patrol. They already have a lot on their hands. Also in that Rio Grande Valley, we did see yesterday 400 additional troops arrive. That was deployed actually from Governor Greg Abbott, part of the Texas Tactical Border Force. So the troops are also here to provide assistance to the Border Patrol agents. But the good news is the Border Patrol agents were injured in yesterday's shooting.
That is good news. Do you get the sense that the armed presence of American law enforcement and military is only going to increase now as a result of all of this?
I certainly think so, and they do have the attention of Texas Governor Greg Abbott. Obviously, President Trump has been sending troops here. According to the Department of Defense, they're even ready to deploy 2,000 more Marines to the border if it's needed. I'm going to be interesting to see if we continue to see kind of these clashes. And like I said, we are going to see an increase anytime you do have a more tighter border security and more enforcement. You are going to see the smuggling cases really, really pick up. I've been actually speaking with a resident on the California border in the El Centro area. He actually has a game camera set up out there just for animals, but he's noticing a lot of individuals now crossing illegally. And now under this administration, they are not trying to turn themselves into Border Patrol. They are looking to avoid. So these are technically gotaways that are making it into the country. So I personally would expect some more clashes, especially when these smuggling cases pick up now that we have more enforcement on the southern border.
What are you hearing about border encounters? I'm seeing reporting, I was talking about some of it just in the last half hour, that the numbers have dropped dramatically from where they were under President Biden, in particular at the peak of December of 2023. What are you seeing out on the border?
So, Vince, when we talk about those declines in illegal crossings, dramatically is not underselling it. I mean, we are seeing illegal crossings just absolutely plummet. Just a couple of days ago, I was in the Del Rio sector, which includes Eagle Pass. Eagle Pass has been a hot spot for illegal crossings under the Biden administration. That's also back in 2021 where you had these 17,000 Haitians under the bridge that happened in that sector. And I was speaking with Texas DPS, and they said that just in one day, this is extremely rare, but in one day, they actually had a total of only 60 migrant encounters for an entire sector. That's shocking, Vince, because I'm used to seeing 60 to 100 to 200 come in a single group, across the river. That was kind of the daily images you saw under the Biden administration. So the crackdown has worked. I've been speaking with sources also in Mexico, ever since President Trump ended that CBP-1 program, some migrants are starting to self-deport back to their home countries. They are choosing not to live in Mexico. So the illegal crossings have been, I've personally just been shocked of how low they've already gotten. I did expect, obviously, with President Trump in, you have tougher border security, more of a hardline messaging.
Right.
But then those numbers were going to decrease eventually. But to absolutely plummet, like I said, for 60 migrant counters for a whole border sector is, doesn't even seem real saying it.
What has this done for morale in Customs and Border Protection and ICE specifically?
It's been a complete 180. When you speak with Texas DPS, when you speak with Border Patrol agents, they feel like they finally have what they call a fighter in the White House, and they have a commander-in-chief that has their back. Under the Biden administration, it's obvious now, but morale was record low. I remember speaking to a Border Patrol agent, and he says, and I will never forget this quote, he says, "I feel like an Uber driver. We are no longer patrolling the border. We are just doing processing." He's like, all I do is pick up migrants, take them to a processing center, and repeat that for 10 hours. So the morale has completely flipped already. We did see DHS Secretary Kristi Noem today on the ground in New York City with the ICE raids. You never saw that with Mayorkas. So you already feel the morale, and you were already feeling that change the month ahead before Trump took office. I was down here in Texas as well, and Tom Homan came and actually visited. The energy, you could already feel that they finally have someone that has their back. You have a border czar that has the exact same messaging as the law enforcement here in Texas. And
one of the things that I've noticed about all of this that I think is kind of the remnants of the Biden administration in terms of just these awful scandals that administration gave us. The fact that Tom Homan and ICE are in the process of gathering thousands upon thousands of very violent criminals up who are roaming our streets free. They didn't just, they didn't start the investigation into who these people are in the last few days. The reason they're able to go after these people is because the government already knew they were here. And the Biden administration let that happen, Jorge. Doesn't this seem like one of the biggest scandals of a very scandalous administration?
Yeah, when I talk to people, I said one of the biggest policy failures when it came to immigration for the Biden administration was the catch and release. Border Patrol agents, instead of just apprehending individuals coming to the country illegally, then sending them into a migrant detention center, they were released into the country. They were released with an NTA, so that's a notice to appear in court. And when the system got so overwhelmed, I remember interviewing countless of Venezuelans who didn't have court dates for another 7 years. And on top of that, when Border Patrol agents will run background checks on these individuals, because Venezuela doesn't share background information on those individuals, we have no idea who we are releasing into the country. Eventually, now we find out that we started releasing Trinidad Alwa gang members into the U.S. According to Tom Homan, he believes Trinidad Alwa was active in at least 16 states. And I think that what really highlighted this and opened the eyes of Americans across the country was the Lincoln Riley trial, when they found out that Jose Ibarra entered the country illegally. He was then released, went to New York City, and technically we were all paying for his hotel stay. He then gets that humanitarian flight to Georgia where he commits a murder.
Yeah.
Those are the stories of many across the nation. So now it's about getting those individuals, removing those individuals as fast as they can. I've actually been surprised with just how fast the administration has already caught so many Trinidad Alwa gang members across the country already, and already put them in process of removal.
Yeah, for sure, including the guy who was involved in taking over that Colorado apartment complex. They just picked him up, one of the ringleaders there. The left has spent so long, Jorge, pretending like none of this is happening, to the extent that it is, that they say things like, oh, immigrants commit crimes at lower rates than Americans. They make these excuses for illegal immigration into the United States. And yet I think the American people, the polling is really clear on this. Everyone is on Trump's side. Everybody. They're on Trump's side on getting control of all of this. And I would say, lastly, that I think that the Trump administration has been very smart about how they handle this in public, which is not only are they doing exactly what they promised they would do, which is rounding up all of these violent illegals, but they're also publicizing it. They're putting cameras out in the field. They're talking to the press. They're showing people the murderers and the rapists and the child sex abusers that they're picking up and say, see, we're doing it, and these people actually exist.
And Vince, as much as putting out all the photos and videos of all these arrests, and it's important to show American voters what's going on, I think it's even more important, just from being here on the ground, that messaging to individuals who are thinking about crossing illegally. Now they know We are not going to be in a catch-and-release program. We will be removed and deported. So that is powerful as well. Here in South Texas, across the southern border, it's a community that's overwhelmingly Hispanic, votes Democrat for decades. The Latino voters here felt that they were ignored for years under the Biden administration, and they want to see mass deportations. I believe I was looking at polling back in 2016, mass deportations only had about 36% for the American public. That has jumped up, depending on what polling, around 60% now. So it's really amazing kind of to see that turnaround. And the Latino voters in South Texas, this is exactly what they voted for, and this is what they want to see. It was their communities that were first impacted before the rest of the nation started to see the fallout of the border crisis.
Yeah, it's a sign of how bad things have gotten. It took seeing these horrible things happen to all of our communities to turn public opinion so robustly. But man, the president executing on exactly what the voters put him in office for. Hey, Jorge Ventura, thank you very much with NewsNation. Always such a fantastic reporter. Always appreciate your insights from the border, sir. Thank you. All right, coming up here in the next hour, we're going to chat with Reagan Reese of the Daily Caller. She was inside of that first official White House press briefing today with Karoline Leavitt and got a chance to ask a question about a couple of questions, but one of them was about these non-governmental organizations who've taken ungodly sums of money from taxpayers in order to traffic human beings into the country. And there's a number of them. They have all sorts of different names. A lot of them are purportedly, nominally religious organizations. The left, which has argued for years that we need separation of church and state. We can't have any commingling whatsoever, unless, of course, we're using the names of various churches to justify bringing foreign nationals into our country. Then that's totally fine. Then, open up the checkbooks, baby. But what is going on with, this Catholic Charities? Why is Catholic Charities bringing in tons of illegals into our country? Why are they human trafficking people in? So Reagan Reese today asking Karoline Leavitt about this, and here's how that went.
Reagan, since you're in the back row, I hear the back row hasn't gotten much attention in the last 4 years, so I'm happy to answer your question.
And I can project. Does the president intend to permanently cut off funding to NGOs that are bringing illegal foreign nationals to the country, such as Catholic Charities?
I am actually quite certain that the president signed an executive order that did just that, and I can point you to that.
There you go. So so we went back and looked at the executive orders that the president has put out, and among them is an executive order that he did sign among his 200 actions that he took on day one, on January 20th. And the headline on that was Protecting the American People Against Invasion. And the purpose of this EO was, over the last 4 years, the prior administration invited, administered, and oversaw an unprecedented flood of illegal immigration into the United States. Millions of illegal aliens crossed our borders or were permitted to fly directly into the United States on commercial flights and allowed to settle in American communities in violation of long-standing federal laws. Many of these aliens unlawfully within the U.S. present significant threats to national security and public safety, committing vile and heinous acts against innocent Americans. Others are engaged in hostile activities, including espionage, economic espionage, and preparations for terror-related activities. Many have abused the generosity of the American people, and their presence in the United States has cost taxpayers billions of dollars at the federal, state, and local levels. It goes on to talk about how they're calling on all agencies to take appropriate action to revoke all memoranda, guidance, or policies that basically keep aiding and abetting all of this. And so what followed was that the various agencies who have been giving money to these NGOs in order to help traffic human beings into the country, they're cutting that off. So what we have now is, for the first time, official confirmation from the White House that some of the biggest offenders here that were taking massive amounts of federal tax dollars are being cut off. No more human trafficking at your expense. Great news today. Reagan Reese will join us coming up at 4:30. We'll talk to her about what else she learned from a very long-winded and effective White House press conference today. Quite a change of pace from the Coringe era.